maybe you can work it into one of the other questions. The next one was mentioned during this last question. What should the United States be doing with regard to the conflict in Syria, which has been going on for the last 5 years? And let's see, we'll start with Bernadine and go to the right this time. 4 minutes.
I can tell you what my candidate has said. Jill Stein has said that we need to quit arming both sides, all sides. That the conflict in Syria is extremely complicated. And there are many things going on, but again, because that's all I'm going to say is that my candidate would say we have got to quit selling arms because the United States is the largest arms dealer in the world. In fact, that's one of the only things that we make. I mean, we make, other things, but that is our big product to the world. And they're using both guns, both sides, all sides are using what they've gotten from the United States. So again, what I need to say is that I have a girlfriend who lives in Damascus, and she lived in America for quite a while. She's got a very fascinating story, but she came here and worked long enough to get Social Security. She's a professional, but could only get jobs working in hotels, and then worked her way up to manager because she's very smart. And she decided to go back to Damascus after the war started. And her friends there say to her, "You have an American passport and you're here, what is the matter with you?" But that's where all her friends are. Her son that she came to raise here went to San Francisco, but she was just here last year and went back to Damascus. And they want Assad to stay in. They want Assad to stay in. The reason why we don't want Assad to stay in? Well, surmise. Oil, he was going to get paid in euros like Saddam. When the dollar is not the currency of choice anymore, that harms our economy. Many reasons, not for the people. I can tell you, I know people who say they want Assad. Even though they only get the rebels are all time making crazy, they only get like 5 hours a day of electricity and maybe 4 hours a day of water. She wants to stay. In Damascus, they want Assad to stay. That's all I can say.
Let's go to Ken this time and reverse the direction.
You don't have to repeat it. I'm good. As mentioned before in the previous question, I kind of answered this together. Governor Johnson has said that he wants to engage in diplomacy with Putin to try to scale back the conflict in Syria, rather than continuing to push a policy of regime change. There's really not a lot more else to say from a where we start perspective. I think that that's key, and it's a fundamental difference than what we're doing right now. So let's start there. Let's start by stop arming people and start talking instead. And I'm going to yield back some time to get this back on track for you.
Thanks. So you come around to Jason.
Okay, thanks. When you look at what's going on in Syria, and I wanted to throw this out there because I just had a chance to observe this about a week ago. There's a Netflix documentary out there called The White Helmets. I don't know if anybody's heard of it or seen it. It is about a local rescue group that lives in different cities in Syria. Even through the conflict, they have remained on a volunteer basis, and don't get paid to do rescue work for people trapped in the rubble under bombing. So it's only like 45 minutes long. It's really worth your time to watch it. So I just wanted to throw that out there. From the heart, what you feel when you ask a question like, what should we do about the conflict in Syria? I don't know how there could be any other answer than we should end it. How can ending the conflict not be the ultimate goal? And I can tell you that ending the conflict in Syria is not going to happen by defeating ISIS. In fact, they're likely to disappear and fall as quickly as they arose. And once they do, you're going to find Saudi Arabia and Iran staring each other in the eye over who's going to control the territory and the land between them. Because right now, the countries of Syria and the countries of Iraq do not exist as they did in 2011. Okay, what essentially you have is two regimes that have retreated to the capital city, Damascus in the case of Syria, Baghdad in the case of Iraq, and they exercise very little control over what goes on in the rest of the countryside. I have no doubt that the folks that are still in Damascus are regime loyalists, and they absolutely want Assad to stay. That makes perfect sense to me. That doesn't mean that the 4 million people that fled Syria as refugees feel that way. That doesn't mean that the people who live in Aleppo, who, by the way, today, right now as we're having this conversation, is being deliberately and systematically targeted by the Russian Air Force and the Syrian Air Force, by the way. Not only hospitals, schools, they are deliberately targeting civilians. That is happening today, right now as we're having this discussion. So whenever someone talks about a no-fly zone, which I think even Secretary Clinton has acknowledged now, I know that she did say that earlier, I think that she's acknowledged now that that's just not right. But keep in mind the thought process that drives a statement like that. So how are we going to end the conflict? The only way is going to be through political solution. And I totally agree with the comment earlier about the complexity of it. It is an intricate complexity woven into difficulties. You've got the Iran-Saudi Arabia question. You've got the Turkey-Kurd question. You've got the internal Syria question of, do we have to live with the continued regime of Assad? And I personally think that we probably do to bring an end to the conflict. But it's going to take a political solution, and for that you need a diplomat or someone with diplomatic experience. So keep that in mind. Think about the United States and Russia, two nuclear powers. If we don't end the conventional conflict that's going on in Syria, I can tell you that eventually there's going to be an incident, a direct incident between the United States and Russia. It is a matter of time. It's not an if, it's a when. When that happens, I want you to think about who do you want to sit down with the leader of Russia to negotiate a settlement or a way forward after that kind of an incident. Because folks that are really close friends, what's going to happen when one of them decides that they're not friends anymore? What's that relationship going to be like? Do you want two nuclear powers facing each other with someone that could say something so ridiculous during the negotiations that the entire process collapses? Or do you want someone that's calm, even-keeled, thinks about what they say before they say it? Just something to think about in that situation. But I don't think that there's ever going to be an end to the conflict in Syria without that political solution. And that, by the way, is going to involve a huge amount of buy-in from the regional actors. There's simply no way there's ever going to be any kind of lasting peace settlement without involving the stakeholders in the region. Otherwise, you're just dreaming. Thanks.
Okay, TJ Lidovic. The question is, what should we do with regard to the conflict in Syria that has been going on for the last 5 years?
You know, so many of these so-called foreign policy experts on the right and the left have drug America down the primrose path. I think of a couple of guys sitting up there in some think tank in Washington, D.C. with a crystal decanter of sherry and have just got through playing a game of Risk. You know, that's all well and good, but the reality is what? Throughout the history of the world, poor men have fought rich men's wars. And wars are absolutely evil and terrible things that should only be entered into as a last-ditch recourse. The war in Syria is their quarrel, not ours. If Russia is willing to help us fight ISIS and ISIL to save Assad, have at it, boys, I say. We have got to get back to a common sense foreign policy around the globe and realize that the American tradition is rooted, as Ken alluded to earlier, in avoiding these entangling alliances, avoiding these conflicts that are an offshoot of imperialistic behavior. We're not an empire, we're a republic. And we have got to get back to our Republican tradition of foreign policy that puts America first.
Okay, should we continue with the round? Yeah, let's just keep going down the line. Bernadine Zenny with 2 minutes on this question of Syria. Thank you.
Jason, again, you know, I have to say that everybody on this panel has made my candidate's case for her about ending empire and bringing military might into a sensible way. I keep hearing the things that I and my candidate keep saying. Unfortunately, their candidates aren't saying that. Jason, you sound, really reasonable and all, but your candidate, Hillary, has only said aggressive things about ISIS and about the Middle East and about other leaders. I can't even get why you would support her when your ideas are so much more sensible than what Hillary has actually said and what Hillary has actually done and what she said she's going to do. She vilifies ISIS, which of course is an offshoot of things Americans did again. I mean, we've created ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Mujahideen, the Muslim Brotherhood. There's no bad actors that the CIA has not worked with. So, unfortunately, my candidate, Jill Stein, is the only one who has actually got a plan of things she will actually do. To actually do all these things that all my colleagues and fellow participants have said we need to do. None of their candidates have.
So we're going, I guess, to Ken next. Thank you.
Well, I will say one thing that's encouraging is that really what I'm hearing up here is that 3 of the 4, at least, candidates agree that we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. That sounds like regime change is not a good plan. It sounds like the country is moving the correct direction, a place where I know the Greens and Libertarians have been for some time. We tend to agree, slight nuances, differences in foreign policy realm, but we tend to agree that we should be minding our own business, doing other things other than messing with other people's countries. I think that, again, going back to what Governor Johnson has said is that we need to end the policies of regime change. We need to engage in more diplomacy. Summed up, we need to stay out of other people's business. And literally, there is not a phrase that best describes a libertarian any better than that.
Okay, Jason, for 2 minutes, please.
Thanks. A lot of the sentiments that are expressed on a personal level, I hear and I think those things are true if I can preface them with these words: I wish. I wish we could just mind our own business and nothing bad would ever happen. I wish we could just cut the military budget by 50%. I wish we could blame everything on CIA conspiracy theories, which are mostly unfounded. Oh yeah, they've definitely been up to some things that they shouldn't have been, and I actually would like to see that addressed through congressional oversight, for sure. But what you're hearing about that for the most part is the Hollywood version, that they're everywhere. I've worked with those guys. You would be so disappointed. You really would. You would not be able to entertain the idea that they're everywhere doing everything, working the levers, if you will, behind the scenes. I mean, it's just not true. They wish it was true. They have either the expertise, the resources, or frankly, just the darn luck to even be in the right place at the right time, to do half the things that they get blamed for. So I feel like I've got to stick up a little bit for our colleagues over in the CIA, because I think they get a bad rap. And part of that is because a lot of what they do is classified. And that's a whole other discussion that we don't even have on here. It's certainly one the country needs to have about how we deal with the secrets our government keeps in order to keep us safe. And how can we as citizens make informed decisions on that. But back to the earlier point, how can I support a candidate who's more aggressive than I am? Because I'm the type of guy that takes the world as it is, not as I wish it was. And it's just not going to work the other way. It's going to take somebody who's tough. It's going to take somebody who's more aggressive. That's the reality we have. You can either accept that or not. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. And TJ, I think you're the last person with 2 minutes on the conflict of Syria, in Syria, and then we're going to pass out some more of these cards to people who want to write a question down.
You know, I'm very glad that Dr. Jill Stein is carrying the banner for the Green Party in this election, because so many of the ideas that she advances were carried by Bernie Sanders, who is really, truth be told, polar opposite from Mrs. Clinton. So it's good that progressives have an authentic option to really support somebody that believes what they say. But the bottom line is there's going to be 1 or 2 people elected president. It's going to be Hillary Rodham Clinton or Donald Trump. And you don't have to like the messenger to appreciate the message. And that is America first. We're going to put our country, our people first. And that's what it's about. 2 candidates took on the establishments of their political parties. 1 lost, 1 won. Donald Trump won. The Republican establishment didn't want him. They got him. He's running not so much as a Republican, but as an America First leader. The Democrats had that opportunity. Their establishment blocked Bernie out. So if we're going to fundamentally change America for the better, there's only one person that can get 270 electoral votes, and you may not like the messenger, but the message is good: Donald Trump.
Okay. All right, so we've got 2 more questions. I think we're only going to have time for one of them. They deal with Libya or our defense budget. And I'm thinking we'll go with the defense budget question, because we discussed a couple of other specific countries already. Let's start with Ken. And the question is simple: what changes need to be made with regard to our defense budget? 4 minutes.
Well, mine's going to be pretty simple, because we started this, I actually referenced this, I think, at the very, very beginning. Governor Johnson has said that the Pentagon itself has said it can cut its own budget by 20%. That's probably a really good place to start. When the guys that are in charge of defending things say, you know, we don't need all this money. That's probably a really good place to start. From there, you can start looking at different policies. You can look at technology. You can look at lots of different things to decrease the military budget. As Dana mentioned, 52%? 54% of the national budget goes to defense. My guess is that we could probably reduce that here. And it doesn't need to be that much, no matter what the number is. The point is that the Pentagon itself has said we can reduce the budget. They're the ones in charge of spending the money. If we can get Congress to quit, building things they don't want, and they put it immediately into, if I could remember the name of the junkyard in the desert, where they immediately put the stuff they get brand new that they didn't want. I mean, literally they do that. They get stuff they didn't want and they just put it in the desert. That would be a really good place to start cutting the budget. Since I've got a minute here, I will mention who will be elected. I have to respond to that since I didn't get to in the way that works. It is an electoral college race in Kentucky, and everywhere. 51 states, because the DC, the Constitution was amended to let DC have electoral votes. Each state is its own election, right? That's very important to remember. This is not a national election. It is 51 statewide elections occurring at the same time, on the same day. We are vying for electoral votes within each state. Kentucky has 8 electoral votes total. We are winner take all, which means that if the winner wins by 1 vote or 1 million votes, they get 8 electoral votes, the end. Current polling in Kentucky shows that Trump is at 52%, Clinton's at 29%, Johnson's at 7%, Stein's at 5%. That's current polling in Kentucky. The reality is, math says Clinton isn't going to win Kentucky. The only way that anything changes is if there's some sort of drastic change towards the Green or Libertarian parties that could shake things up. But as it stands, Trump is likely to win Kentucky. Now that's not a bad thing for voters. This actually empowers you. You can vote however you want without being afraid of any of lesser two evils, nonsense, any of that. Throw it out the window. Trump's going to win Kentucky unless something crazy happens. If something crazy happens, well, it might be crazy good. But the point is that you don't have to worry about it, and that's the point. I just want to get that out there because I have to do that everywhere I go.
All right, thanks, Ken. Let's go to Jason Belcher on the question of what changes need to be made with regard to our defense budget.
So, first of all, the idea of reduction is a good one. But the question isn't, should the defense budget be reduced? The question is how to do it and by how much. Let me assure you that in a single fiscal year, a 50% reduction is not a budget cut. That's not cutting the budget, that's gutting the budget. You're going to have a military that will not be able to function and fulfill its duties. The United States military has faced a lot of enemies over the past 50 years and even this lifetime. The only thing I can think of that could really defeat it would come from here at home. If you want to wreck the U.S. military, throw a 50% reduction out there in 1 year and sit back and see what happens. And you can act surprised if you want to, if it makes you feel better, but that's just the reality. Are there room for improvement? Absolutely. I can't tell you how many different places there are where we could reduce fraud, waste, and abuse, where we can eliminate unnecessary weapon systems. And it's been talked to already by the other three panelists, and they're 100% right. Presidents have tried to cut wasteful military programs. They've tried to close bases. And every single time Congress says, no, we're going to keep open. In our system of government, the people have the final say. Congress has the last word. The president can veto, but Congress gets to override it, and that's it. And that's the end of the discussion. So, the question becomes, if we want to do this, you have to work with Congress. Who is going to be best suited to do that? Do I think that Hillary Clinton would support a 10% or a 15% reduction in the military budget? I do not think that. Do I think she would support a 5% reduction? I do think that's possible. And if you do that over 10 years, you get to that 50% that you want. But you do it in a way that doesn't impact the operational capability of the military, that doesn't diminish our capacity to defend ourselves, and that doesn't cause harm, irreparable harm, I might add, to the one institution in this country that we trust the most. You can check any opinion poll you want. The U.S. military is #1 in trustworthiness in the United States. Congress is what, 12%, 13%? The military, 85-90 in every poll. So the question is about mechanics. It's not really about philosophy. It's not really about destination. But we have a responsibility, if we're going to do that, and I think it's the right thing, to do it in a responsible way, and one that doesn't cause more problems than it solves. And by the way, I want to bring this up real quick. I've only got a minute and a half left. When it comes to closing bases overseas, particularly the large installations, like say, take a Ramstein or an LVD, I want folks to understand that if you want to close those, that is going to cause your cost to increase initially. It is going to cost more money to close those bases because you have to move all of that equipment and all those personnel from where they are back to the United States. So anticipate that if you do that, and if that's the way we want to go, initially there's going to be a short-term spike in military spending, not a reduction. So if we manage to pass all those closures, you can look for a peak to happen in defense spending right away, which is why I think the incremental approach is even more important because it will allow us to absorb that as we go over time and spread it out over about a 10-year period. But I agree with everyone that this is really mainly a congressional problem. Presidents have a lot of authority to the commander-in-chief, but no president, none of our candidates are ever going to be able to just 50% cut the military budget. That is not going to happen. Congress won't allow it. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll move to TJ Vidovic on the question of our defense budget.
Well, you know, I tell you one part of, I guess you can classify under defense budget, and I think probably would be as close to achieving unanimity among everybody here as any issue. And that is, as Mr. Trump has said, a great country takes care of its warriors. And to me, if we have to sell the Great Smoky Mountains and Yellowstone, we've got to take care of our veterans, especially with health care. And other than Jason, I see another veteran in here, former Fayette County Judge Executive John Larson, who has devoted so much of his time to veterans issues and to veterans causes voluntarily over the years. And other than Jason and John, are there any other veterans in here tonight? Stand up and let's recognize these heroes and give them a round of applause. Thank you all for your service. But, you know, the first question I think we opened the forum with was specifically talking about military bases. And I said that I thought Mr. Trump would be open to seeing which ones were working, which ones were not. Now, that's a little bit different than the overall context of military spending in general. There should not be any sacred cows, and waste, fraud, and abuse trickles down into every facet of our federal budget, including the military's. It all needs to be looked at. But we've got some depleted arsenals too, quite frankly. And we have to maintain a military in the world that is second to none to achieve the security of our nation. Now, we should only engage that military when there are absolutely no other recourses and war is declared by the Congress of the United States. But we have to achieve peace through strength. We have to have a military that is second to none in the world, and we have to take care of every individual that has worn or wears the uniform of the United States Armed Forces.
Thank you. Bernadine Zenny of the Green Party.
I can tell you that Jill has called for a 50% reduction in the military budget. And what the remaining would be used for the things that the military actually needs, including taking care of the veterans. And you know, Jason, unfortunately, your candidate has never said anything that you say. You keep saying these things, and Hillary has never said any of this. And that, you know, and actually, Donald Trump has said he wanted to expand the military. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, except I believe that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. Jill has said that she wants to reduce the military budget by 50%, and that would be by getting rid of bases that are unnecessary, et cetera, planes that are unnecessary, submarines that are unnecessary, atomic everything that's unnecessary. That more atomic upon more atomic, we need to be thinking no atomic. We need to be reducing atomic, not expanding atomic. I don't know the names that they give to all of these programs, but they have names, and basically all they are is just more planes, more guns, more things that we don't want to use. We hope we don't use them. We have enough military might to do whatever needs to be done. And quite frankly, if we do get attacked, which we have not been attacked since Pearl Harbor, we can do exactly what FDR did. We can mobilize, but my candidate wants to mobilize all that for green energy, the Green New Deal. And it's Green New Deal just like FDR. She's got a whole plan for that. And the other thing I have to say is waste, fraud, and abuse. I think people here are channeling Jill Stein because that is her term, waste, fraud, and abuse, when she talks about Wall Street. And I've heard it twice. I don't know, I can't imagine where that's coming from. The other thing is, Jason, I'm sorry, the most trusted group in America are nurses. I am a nurse, and for years, when you poll the public, the most trusted group in America are nurses. And I can tell you, I worked at a VA hospital, and there's nothing I would rather do than work at a VA hospital and take care of veterans. The people that are veterans, males and females, are some of the most righteous people, the most needy people because of what they've done. And even when they go in for like their gallbladder or whatever, when they have the medical care that is given to them as a veteran. I worked at a veteran hospital and I loved working at the Veterans Hospital. So it's not at all about the military, it's about how we misuse the military. How we really, you want to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, that's what's happened with all of these wars of aggression, all these failed states, and all of this more of the same, of endless war that has got to end. We have to end endless war. And all of this money, all of these trillions of dollars that have been spent since 9/11, if we had spent all of these trillions of dollars on education and on health care and on taking care of people in these countries that, whatever they say attacked us in Afghanistan after the Soviet Union pulled out, in taking care of the countries of Yemen and Sudan and all of these places where we're creating terrorists by our bombing. And I just got to tell you that I have to say this since we're talking about the military. Obama has killed 2 American citizens. 2 American citizens. Okay, you know what that means? They were over in the other countries, but that means if he doesn't like you, he can kill you. If he doesn't like me, he can kill me.
All right. I have some of the cards with questions on them.
Just a quick response.
On the budget?
Yeah, on that last bit.
All right, go 30 seconds, okay?
Oh, thank you. I assume it was just a misspeak about the comment that we haven't been attacked since Pearl Harbor, obviously 9/11, but I think that was just a misspeak. Fraud, waste, and abuse is not a political party term. That is an in-house Department of Defense term. We actually have an entire Inspector General's office that's set up on an annual basis to find and eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. So as stated earlier, the military takes that seriously, even though sometimes it's an uphill battle and we don't win the fights that we want to win budget-wise. Thanks.
All right, I've looked over some of these questions before, and the one that seems to be clearest is, what should America do to protect and defend Israel, the only true democracy in the Middle East? Let's just start with Jason and go down to the right.
I think folks get this question about Secretary Clinton a lot. What is her signature accomplishment as Secretary of State during her term? I know she wants to negotiate a ceasefire that pertains to Israel. It's a long-time U.S. ally. The issue with democracy, that's a debate we don't have. Israeli democracy is really not a debate we have time for here. But it's a legitimate question because it calls into play really the entire way we approach our policies for the Middle East. A lot of the Arab nations from which that are sort of hotbeds of jihadism, the Israel issue is almost inseparable from the process that grows that. And so our support for Israel is constantly portrayed as one of the driving factors for that. I would say that Israel is an important U.S. ally. I think Secretary Clinton has made that very clear, that they're an ally worth defending, they're an ally worth supporting, and I have every reason to believe that would continue under a Clinton presidency. I guess that's the short answer.
Yep, that is a short answer, thank you.
Got to set a record.
TJ?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, can find it. What should America do to protect and defend Israel, the only true democracy in the Middle East?
You know, my dear friend, the late great Gatewood Galbraith, had a wonderful line about Israel, and he called Israel the canary in the mine shaft. That when there's trouble brewing, you're going to hear it there first. And I think that that's a very apt analysis to a certain degree. However, are Israel's interests and American interests always in sync? more often than not, yes. But we have got to always put America first, regardless of any relationship, be it with Israel or Great Britain or anybody else. If it's not in America's best interest, then it's got to play second fiddle. But there is a special relationship there, and you know, the Allies in the aftermath of World War II carved out the modern state of Israel. So you know, we have a certain obligation. Although I was reading the other day, and there's a wonderful new biography of Franklin Roosevelt's last few years, and when he was at Yalta, he was on a ship with Ibn Saud, the Saudi king, and Saud told him, he said, "Oh, don't carve out Israel in the Arab street. Do it in Germany. They're the people that oppressed them." So you know, but history, hindsight, as they say, is 20/20.
Thank you. Bernadine Zenny?
I don't think we have to do anything to protect and defend Israel. President Obama just okayed $68 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars of your and my money to Israel this past week. Israel is also the only nuclear-armed nation in the Middle East. And whether Israel is actually a democracy is way up for debate, because it depends on what you mean by democracy. I can tell you that my brother-in-law's family lives in Nazareth, which they call Nazarene in Arabic, and it's an Arab town, and they are not allowed to buy land. My brother-in-law has an Israeli passport. He has an Israeli and an American passport, and he is an Israeli citizen, but he is an Arab. They are treated not like second-class citizens, they are treated like third-class citizens. And we're not even going to talk about the kinds of things that happen in Gaza and in the West Bank, except that the Israeli government allows settlers to do things to the Palestinians with impunity, like throw fire bombs and burn alive an entire family in Gaza. Burn alive an entire family. And these things go on day after day after day, and you don't hear them because there is a reason that people do not want you to know what is actually happening to the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank. So I don't think we have to do anything to protect and defend Israel. I think Israel is going to do fine since they have a nuclear weapon, and the fellow that exposed that is in prison today. The fellow that exposed the fact that Israel has a nuclear weapon is in prison today. So I think, and I can tell you what Jill Stein's policy is. It's all countries that violate international law. All countries. This is the Saudis. Any is not going to get U.S. money, and that would include Israel. No favoritism and no bias. The Saudis won't get U.S. money. Israel won't get U.S. money. Any countries that have been violating international law will not get your money. I think that's fair.
All right, Ken, you have the last word, unless we want to do a rebuttal round, but that'll be up to everybody here.
Yeah, have it on. All right, that's right. It's just like, wow, it's awfully quiet. Long story short, quit funding both sides of a conflict. I mean, once again, same scenario. We are funding Israel, we are funding their neighbors, we are funding various groups. At some point, if you're going to just throw money at a problem, well, in general, when you just throw money at a problem, it doesn't get solved. The Israelis certainly don't need our help. And you can look at that militarily. You can go back to the 6-Day War, where they were attacked by four nations simultaneously, and won. They do not need our direct assistance. Additionally, I don't think that it's a good idea to be involved in skirmishes like that. I think, again, this is the same issue with Syria or with Libya, which we did not touch on, but really the same thing. We're interfering in the affairs of local people, trying to decide what type of government, what reality they want to live in. And here's us a half a world away involved in that. It's so complicated to even go backward to figure out how this all began, but this all goes back to World War II and the promise of the creation of a Jewish state, and then simultaneously promising the Palestinians for their support, we give them a state, and it's like, oops, we promised the same piece of land to two different groups. Oops. And so this is the kind of failed policies that are created when we're trying to play, carve a country like it's, somebody mentioned before, it's like playing Risk. This is not playing Risk. These are real people. These are real lives. These are real nations. You can't just go about trying to be the hand of God to determine what happens in an area. The people have to have a say in their own destiny. And that, I think, is the fatal flaw in all this. As far as protecting Israel, back to the core question, not necessary. Protecting the other people in the region, again, not necessary. I think the main thing is that if we continue to fund both sides, which they then use to arm themselves, you're only going to create the ability for them to continue conflict, rather than, instead of just sending money, if there's a humanitarian crisis, let's send food. If there's, if we need to have temporary shelter, then let's build temporary shelter. The situation in Israel is not neat and tidy by any means. I don't want to, and I should mention this is me speaking, not the governor. I don't think that there is a single, oh, geez, that was the answer all along. There's not one answer to this problem, but certainly continuing to fund both sides in a conflict is not the answer.
All right, it's 5 till 9. I'm inclined to quit while we're ahead, but I'd like to thank the panelists for conducting a debate that was...
Anything, we could each take a minute? I mean, is there anything?
These questions are a little... some people handed them in before knowing it was a foreign policy. I'm sorry, but I want to praise the level of the discussion tonight. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you to BCTC, the group Students for Peace and Earth Justice for sponsoring this event. And thank all the people at BCTC who made it possible.